Good afternoon. Welcome to day 2 of the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference Competitive Advantage Talks presented by Ticketmaster. My name is Gerardo Guadiana. I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan, and it is my pleasure to be introducing our presentation today, Fixing the Charge. Please join me in welcoming our presenter, Nate Duncan, host of the Dunked On podcast.
Thank you. So I remember in 1994, I walked into the gym for the first day of freshman basketball tryouts, a gangly lad of 6'5", and I think I weighed about $140 back then. And the first thing that the coaches had us do in that tryout was practice taking charges at the lower levels. It never occurred to me that I should try to jump in front of an opposing player, fall down, and hope that the referee blew his whistle. But as a rather spindly lad, it turned out I was pretty good at that. And the charge really is something that now coaches have begun to fetishize a lot, right? What is the better indication of sacrifice and team play than giving up your body, taking a charge, looking over expectantly at the referee and seeing him point the other way? Everyone really seems to enjoy that, right? That's what you guys really like a lot as fans, is seeing that? Well, maybe not. Maybe at the highest levels in particular, NBA basketball should be more about great dunks and block shots and fantastic finishes at the rim. And the other thing that it should be about is player safety. When you've got guys who are the level of athletes that NBA athletes are, running full speed at the hoop, and someone jumps in front of them and tries to fall down and take a charge, that's going to be a huge injury risk. That's not why you fell in love with the game, was watching guys jump in front of people and fall down, but yet that happens all the time. And is it really worth it? Certainly there are many charge attempts during a game, but the median team only draws about 0.5 charges per game. And when you consider the number of injuries and the injury risk from that, is that really worth it to have a play that's only going to happen 0.5 times a game cause as many injuries as it does? Another thing that the NBA is very concerned about is that fans, transparency in refereeing, nobody knows what a charge actually is, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So you guys might remember this play. I was at this game. One of the best first halves that I've ever seen. Kevin Durant had 30 in the first half. This is 2014-15 season. Warriors came back from a 20-point deficit in the first half, shaping up for an awesome second half. And right at the end of the first half, Mo Spates steps in. This actually was called a charge, amazingly enough. Looked to me like he was still moving, but who knows? And KD, you'll remember, he missed the start of the season with a Jones fracture that year, came back, was playing well, sprained his ankle, missed 8 games, tried to come back, and then had to have another surgery on that. And I'm guessing that an inversion sprain on his right ankle on that same Jones fractured foot probably didn't help him in that regard. Here's another one, Jabari Parker, 2014-15 season. Fast break. P.J. Tucker takes a charge. Jabari Parker tears his right ACL. Could probably argue he was never the same. It's also dangerous for the charge taker. Mike Conley suffered a transverse process fracture in his back, was supposed to miss 4 to 6 weeks, came back in 3 because he's tough. And you also see he knocks over, I think that's Frank Kaminsky down there as well, by falling, allowing himself to be knocked down. He falls into Frank Kaminsky, and that could have been an injury for Kaminsky there too. So, like I was talking about, block charges are just impossible to referee. The referees have all these variables to take in. Really, you can't see it unless you're directly behind the guy to know if he's moving sideways or not. The referee is almost invariably not going to be there. The baseline referee is at an angle to that. How is he supposed to see whether the guy is actually in front of him? And how many of you out there could actually describe the block charge rule to me in under like 30 minutes? Like I could spend this entire presentation trying to tell you what's a charge and what's a block. a lot of people will say when discussing it, oh, he was there. Well, what's there? Does that mean you're not moving at all? Well, no, apparently you can still be moving and take the charge. You don't have to be stationary. Legal guarding position. Oh, well, everyone understands what that is intuitively, right? So it doesn't really make a ton of sense of trying to determine what a charge is. The restricted areas help with that a little bit, adding something objective to it. But every single time there's an offensive foul or a blocking foul, players, coaches, fans are complaining. That's not good for the game to have something where nobody knows until everybody looks over at the ref and you just have no idea what he's going to call because you just can't tell, certainly not live. So here's a few examples here that we'll go through. I'll just kind of click through these as I'm talking, but I mean, can you tell me whether these are blocks or charges beforehand? I find it rather difficult to be sure. And you can note on basically all of these here too, the player there who's taking the charge, he probably could have actually made a play on the ball. On a lot of these, the guy taking the charge is actually a bigger player, plays a larger position than the guy driving to the basket. What if you decided to jump and block the shot? What if you decided to go for a steal? What if you just stood tall, made the guy go around you instead of falling down? Got to whip through these here. I'm not known for my brevity. I apologize. And so you can talk about, well, can you even play defense without the charge? I would argue that you absolutely can. I mean, we said that charges only happen 0.5 times a game. Some of the best defensive players in basketball, as of a couple of weeks ago when I looked at this, haven't taken a charge all year. Kawhi Leonard has not taken a charge all season. Ben Simmons, Lonzo Ball, Klay Thompson. Well, okay, that's great for those guys, right? Those guys, here, we'll have to just click through this. Those guys, they're really athletic. They don't need to take charges. What about the poor little guy, the guy who just, can't compete athletically? Well, maybe he shouldn't be in the NBA, number one. But number two, let's say TJ McConnell. How many charges do you think TJ McConnell has taken this year? He's got one charge in over 1,000 minutes when I looked at this a couple weeks ago. Even Kyle Korver, another maybe the most unathletic wing player in the league, he's only taken 4 charges in 936 minutes. So if you're gonna say, well, it's an essential part of the game, even these unathletic guys just can't compete without the charge, it's not really true. And if you look at individual defensive metrics and charge taking, charges per 100 plays have a correlation of only 0.09 with individual defensive RAPM. RAPM basically measures the defensive impact of you being on or off the floor adjusted for your teammates and the opposition. And compare that to actually making a real defensive play, like a steal, 0.19. A block shot, 0.23. Defensive rebound, 0.21. Those have much more of a correlation with actually stopping your opponent than charges do. So in that vein, I wanted to take a look at how taking charges actually affects your defense. Is it a good play for most players? So I had to hand track this, so we weren't able to get an enormous sample size, but over about 30 games, we tracked 4 outcomes. And charges, those are easily tracked, right? We've got that already. Blocking fouls, they'll sometimes be noted in the NBA's play-by-play data, but other times it's not. That's not very reliable. So we actually just had to track that manually. A no call. Here's an example of that. Fall down, give up a dunk, no call. And a whiff where you try to take a charge and it just doesn't work. That's Joel Embiid, by the way. Second in Defensive Player of the Year. Might have worked a little better if instead of deactivating like that, he actually tried to make a play on the ball on Danilo Gallinari there. Now, the other thing that we did here is we only tracked this for either plays in help defense or fast breaks. Because one-on-one defense, I think, is a different animal. There, if you're really getting run over one-on-one, that's different. It also doesn't cause the kinds of dangerous collisions where a guy really has a head of steam at the basket. So help defense, a secondary defender coming over, trying to take a charge, or in a fast break situation like this. So what happens when you try to take a charge? Well, really, only 32% of charge attempts we found were actually successful. It's not a great number. Now, charges are very valuable. You're probably taking away a play at the basket that would have been a high percentage shot in theory, although we don't know what the alternative would be if you actually tried to just play defense, block the shot, use verticality, something like that. You'd probably reduce the opponent's chance of scoring pretty well. 23% of the time, a blocking foul was called. And so you might say, without looking at the other two categories, that's not a bad ratio, right? 60% of the time you get a charge when the whistle blows. But what about when the whistle doesn't get blown? Well, we had guys just whiff 20% of the time. That's not a very good outcome. You're just allowing the guy to go right by you and you're not contesting him at all. And then a no call, when you're falling down, you're either stopping yourself from being in the play on that guy, or he might pass to someone else, like in the example that we've seen, and you're out of position there as well. So certainly there are some players like Kyle Lowry or Sonny Ilyasova who are really, really good at taking charges. But I think this data shows that in a lot of situations, for a lot of players, for a lot of teams, making the decision to try to take a charge instead of actually contesting isn't necessarily the right play. So how are we going to fix this? My idea, which I'll expand on a little bit here, is to just move the charge circle out more. The idea being that you're going to reduce the most dangerous collisions. You're not going to get these situations where guys have a head of steam, where they're going to be causing collisions right at the basket. Guys are in the air, trying to take off, step on someone's foot, get bridged, that kind of a thing. Years ago, 2004, I think, Mark Cuban on his old blog Maverick, proposed just not allowing charges for help defenders. And I actually personally would be in favor of that. I also don't think there's absolutely zero way that's ever going to get enacted. It's too hard of a change. It's too hard for a lot of people to process. I would love it if they did that, but I think expanding the restricted area is more likely to be enacted. And so one of the other concerns about reducing the enforcement of charges or eliminating it is, well, there's not going to be, we're already focusing too much on the offense here. We're only, offense is at its highest levels basically ever, and taking another tool away from the defense is going to make things even more ridiculous. Well, I think you could compensate for that by actually causing more offensive fouls when guys are making intentional movements, right? I mean, this is, the charge taking is when on defense, you're trying to get the referee to blow his whistle. If you're just trying to play good defense and you're not just standing there like this, and the guy gives you the forearm shove, like that's something that we've seen a lot this year, where as long as you don't extend the arm, you can just use your forearm as a club. Or there's also the guy's behind me and he's trying to run back here, so I'm just gonna go like this. That one is another one where I think that could be called an offensive foul. So you can balance things out a little bit there by trying to make it more the call-seeking behavior and where you're trying to take advantage of the rules for the offense gets punished, but the call-seeking behavior for the defense doesn't get rewarded, right? We want to see actual basketball. We don't want to see guys hoping that the referee is going to blow his whistle. You want to play, and then the point of the referee blowing his whistle is to ensure that the gameplay happens smoothly. So I hit on a couple of these already, but some of the reasons why moving the circle out I think is the best option. It provides an objective standard for referees and fans. I think that's pretty important because people are always arguing about what's a charge and what isn't. And so you have a more objective standard this way. That helps a lot. The most exciting plays are those confrontations at the rim. Move the charge circle out. Now guys aren't getting undercut. They're forced to play better defense, try to jump, try to contest. That leads to the most exciting plays. So it's going to get on SportsCenter. A guy jumping in front and falling down, that's not going to get on SportsCenter. It's not going to draw new fans in. And again, I think important to emphasize that this rule wouldn't affect one-on-one defense, this rule change. And most importantly, it actually has a chance of getting enacted because they've pushed in the restricted area before. You can make the argument that players are faster, they're quicker now. Just don't tell them that we're actually doing it to reduce the number of charges. And for player safety, it's more important. This is something that has been done already, whereas a more radical approach, coaches in particular on the competition committee, they're gonna say, well, you can't take away our precious charges. So this isn't taking away, it's just changing it. So this gives you a little data on what the effect of expanding the restricted area might have. This is a plot of all the charges that took place in November and December of 2018. And about 35% of charges occurred within 2 feet of the restricted area. Restricted area is 4 feet. I'm talking about moving it out to 6, but obviously that's something that could be played with, could be experimented with in the G League. You'll note here too that some of these occur inside the 4 feet. That's because using the tracking data, they use the center of your body. And so if you're kind of like this, it's gonna note that you're further back because it could still be a legal charge in those situations. In practice though, I'm guessing that even fewer charges would be eliminated because you have guys knowing where the line is, they're gonna try and get outside of there. So to say a charge that occurred at 5 feet wouldn't occur with this rule, maybe they would just get another foot outside, or more likely they wouldn't be able to get there. So the idea is the further you push it out, the fewer of these bad collisions that you're gonna have. So that's about all I got here. I guess we can take some questions on this if you'd like. Yeah, right there. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. He asked, would relaxing the defensive 3 seconds rule help this? I don't think it would. I mean, if you look at college, there's even more charges that occur. And also because the restricted area, I think, is a foot smaller. But there is a point to that of like, I think it's more really lateral movement though on the defensive 3 seconds, which makes it harder to draw a charge because you're not already there. But I don't think that necessarily is what causes the collisions so much as it is kind of moving forward or just, you know, the fact that you're trying for a charge on a guy who's driving. So I don't know how well that would work. Yes?
Did you do anything to quantify the effect on play outcome in terms of points per possession or something like that for whiffs or no calls?
I looked at that initially, tracked it, but it was a small enough sample I didn't really feel comfortable providing the data. I mean, I think there's a lot more avenues. He asked, by the way, whether we looked at whiffs and no calls, how many points per possession you get on that. I think that's something that would require a larger sample, you know, between teams, players. You really would need to expand that out a little bit more. I didn't have the horsepower to do that, unfortunately. But I think there's a lot of ways you can go here to quantify, you know, and there's probably certain players where taking a charge would be a smart move for the defense. A lot of guys where it's not necessarily. So I think really even being able to break it down by individual player of whether, you know, what their block versus whiff versus no call versus charge percentage is and say, hey, you know what, like you're 7 feet, you're getting called for a block 60% of the time, you're getting in foul trouble, don't do that anymore. I think that could be really valuable information for teams, but probably really the only way to do that is by hand tracking. I don't think, and that requires a lot of effort, of course, I don't think there would really be a way to do that very well, you know, to say, if you're just looking at dots on a plot of, all right, did this guy really stand here like this and kind of, you know, clearly he's trying to take a charge. I don't think you can really do that without looking at the film. Yeah.
Could you see like defending and how people defend the step back three is kind of becoming a sort of a parallel to this, like where there's debate about nobody really knows once, you know, if someone kicks out, is it an offensive foul or do they go into the line for three?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, clearly the NBA has provided an enforcement priority on protecting shooters, you know, with the Kawhi Leonard injury, with Zaza Pachulia a couple of years ago. I think that's a little bit more objective, though, to see when it's a foul or not. I mean, if you get into the guy's landing zone, and we can argue about whether that's a good idea or not, I don't have as much of a problem with that because you are actually trying to protect guys from injury, and also I think it's a little bit more objective. I think usually, sometimes the referees will be fooled and it's like, okay, it looked like there was contact, there wasn't any. But generally, when there is contact, I think it's pretty clear as to what the rule is. It's just, we can argue about whether that's a good idea or not, but I think it is a little more objective.
What are your thoughts on introducing the restricted area to youth basketball?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, because youth basketball, I guess, are you talking about like high school level? Yeah, do people take charges in middle school? Oh, that's atrocious. Yeah, I do think that overall, like the fetishizing, you can make a number of kind of value judgments about what it means for the sport that everyone just loves charges so much, especially at the lower levels, and that coaches love it, and then guys want to prove how well they're actually like following the coach's advice and get more playing time and stuff like that. I would certainly be for it, but painting one of those lines on each one of the courts and that kind of stuff, and then training the referees on it might be a little bit difficult. I think in particular in the NBA it really matters because number one, that's an entertainment product. Number two, at the lower levels, you probably just have guys who are out of control who are just like running kids over all the time too. And in middle school, you're not taking off from 8 feet away from the basket to try and dunk on someone either. So I think it certainly is annoying at those levels, and I also think that referees love kind of being the show at those lower levels and love to like, oh yeah, well you're not going to do that to me, I'm going to call a charge, that kind of thing. So I would be for that, but I think it's not nearly as important as it is at the NBA level when you're trying to create an entertainment product and get dollars, and injuries are so costly.
Do you think you'd have to do much balancing with an idea like this? So another idea that's out there to increase the diversity of styles is to shrink the key back to actually look like a key, so that you can get a little more big man play.
What do you mean, shrink the key to look like a key? What do you mean by that?
So just with the restricted area still, but like shrink the lane, so that it would promote more post play, kind of diversity of styles. Something like this seems like it would complicate that. These are two hypotheticals.
Well, probably not that much really because, post play, that's one-on-one defense. There's a lower defensive box rule. So I don't think that this would really affect charges on post play much, if at all. Anyone else? Yes.
Would you consider the impact of momentum following a charge in your analysis?
Not in the slightest. He asked if I considered the impact of momentum following a charge, and not really. Although it is a turnover, it's not the same as if you're getting a live ball turnover, you're not getting a fast break going the other way, and there's probably momentum from a steal or a block shot or just a missed layup. That's actually a missed layup might be more valuable than getting a charge too, because then the guys going the other direction, like missed layups, result in more transition opportunities. So I just thinking about it, I wouldn't think that would be a particularly important factor.
Would you consider relaxing the verticality rules? Because you're taking away a tool for the defense to be able to defend the rim, maybe making it easier for them to defend the rim, and now they can't draw charges.
How would you do that exactly? I think it's pretty straightforward. If you jump straight up, generally, I think you're not getting called for a foul these days. I guess the only thing is like if you turn your body a little bit, they'll call fouls. But what did you have in mind, Dylan?
Yeah, I was thinking that, or just arms come down a little bit, right? The whistle's coming up. Just those
Yeah.
little tweaks to offset.
Yeah, I think in theory, if your arms come down because the guy hits you, they're not supposed to call a foul on you. I kind of like the verticality rule the way it is personally, but yeah.
You mentioned players who have a propensity to draw charges. Are there players who commit a lot of charges, and do you think this would have an impact on players fouling out for the foul entry?
Yeah, I think generally the players who are going to commit more charges are the guys who drive more, the guys who have the ball in their hands more. So I think it would be good that star players are probably disproportionately affected by charges, and fans would like to see star players playing the game. I mean, James Harden, for example, a couple of days ago, he got 2 passing crash fouls where he actually had released the ball prior to the offensive foul being called. I think it was in that Lakers game. And so he fouled out. That's not necessarily good for the game. And that's it. Thanks, guys.